I was having your boy Rico from RicoScores, and it is official. Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who has already won a playoff game, is still currently in the running for a Super Bowl, will interview with the Commanders Friday, January 19th, virtually though. This will be the first preliminary interview, so let's not overreact, but we got to talk about whether he prefers us or the Panthers, because he interviews with them as well. And so far, those are the only two interviews that I've heard that he's scheduled. So maybe those are his two priorities, because I feel like other teams have probably requested them. But so far, reportedly, those are the only two that he's accepted. And is it a Josh Harris versus David Tepper battle? Is it an Adam Peters versus whoever they may potentially hire a GM battle? We're going to compare us to the Panthers and why Ben Johnson would not only prefer us, but prefer us by a long shot, by a lot, in my opinion. Also, of course, we're going to update you on the current betting odds for who our next head coach will be. Of course, it's Ben Johnson right now, but how big is the gap? Also, Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris will interview sometime this week with us as well, virtually. And so we got to do a deep dive into their head-to-head matchup in that Lions versus Rams NFC wildcard playoff game that just happened a few days ago. We got to dive into that to see who won that matchup. In between the two, whoever won that matchup, is that the guy we prefer to be our head coach, just simply off that game alone? We're going to dive into all of that and more, but before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative opinion video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned. The hustle does not stop, man. I know I did the live stream earlier. I know I already did a video earlier, but this news felt like it was urgent. I had to go ahead and knock this out now. And even though, again, I keep saying that mock draft keeps getting pushed back, it's ready to go, but more important things just keep getting prioritized in front of it, pushing it back. But the mock draft is on the way soon. I'm recording this at 11:40 p.m. Does not matter. We still gotta get to work, man. And so the mock draft, maybe that'll come out tomorrow morning, afternoon. By the time y'all are watching this video, it's more than likely already January 17th. So be on the lookout for some point later today, technically, for potentially that mock draft. We'll see, unless some other breaking news happens, and I got to talk about that, and then we push the mock draft back even further. So stay tuned for all the content, more live streams coming in, more call-in live shows for y'all to call in and voice your opinions or ask whatever questions you may have, all that type of stuff for y'all to be a part of the show. And without further ado, man, let's go ahead and get to it. Let's get it. All right, so it's been confirmed by Nikki Javala herself. Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson has a virtual interview with the Washington Commanders set up for Friday. Don't exactly know the time, but hey, man, we're moving fast. We're moving fast. Let's get it. So far, again, us and the Panthers are the only two that I see are confirmed right now. So I'm super excited about that. He's interviewing for both the Commanders and the Panthers on Friday for a head coaching position. And of course, he's reportedly the top choice for both jobs. I mean, remember last year he turned down the Panthers job that they offered him to stay with the Lions as their offensive coordinator. He was like, nah, man, I'm good. Yeah, the Panthers are offering me more power, offering me more money, a head coaching title. Nah, I'll just stay with the Lions. And it looks like it was a great choice because, first of all, the Lions just had a terrible season. But also, we're going to talk about it soon, they don't look like they're going to be much better going into next season than they were last season. But also, on the other side, he's in the playoffs right now with the Lions, have a playoff victory and everything, headed towards another game, may win that game. We'll see. The Lions may end up in the NFC Championship. Who knows what happens from there? So, hey, man, Ben Johnson is weighing his options, and it's already been reported, again, that he's one of our top options. I've seen reports that Adam Peters will go all in to get him, and that he's Adam Peters' favorite target, the top head coaching candidate for the Commanders and all of that type of stuff. And he's leading our betting odds, which we'll talk about later in the video. So right now, if we're both prioritizing Ben Johnson as our potential head coaches, both the Commanders and Panthers, when you compare the two, who would you prefer to go be a head coach for? Come on, dog. Like, we can literally go back and forth here. First of all, we have the number 2 overall pick in the draft. The Panthers don't even have a first round pick. Let's start there. We are first in the NFL in cap space with $86.9 million worth of cap space. And like I've already explained and broken down in a whole nother video that's like 30 minutes long, I break down how we can get even more and even potentially get up to like 120 million and pretty much be able to lap most of these other NFL teams in cap space if we really want to. And then you have the Lions a distant second from us with $77.5 million worth of cap space. The closest person to us has more than $9 million less worth of cap space to us with 77 million. Again, we have 86 million. Then you have the Panthers 13th with only $31 million worth of cap space. We have more than double, almost triple the cap space that they have. Like, come on, dog. Number 2 overall pick and most cap space in NFL versus no first round pick at all is going to the Bears, which is the number 1 overall pick. That tells you how bad the Panthers were. They gave up their first overall pick, their first round draft pick that they knew at the time, but now we look back and we see that it's a first overall pick virtually for nothing. But also the fact that they didn't have a first round pick going into the season shows that they had no reason to tank. Like, if anybody in the NFL had absolutely zero reason to tank, it was them. And they still managed to land the number 1 overall pick just because they were that bad. Like, it got to a point for us where it was like there's no benefit to winning, but maybe we are good enough if we really wanted to win some more games and things like that. We had veterans sitting out. We were cutting guys like Danny Johnson so that we could see what the younger guys can do so that Quan Martin and people like that could get more playing time. It's time to evaluate. Winning is pointless at this point. But were we capable of more winning? Maybe. The Panthers were trying to win every single game. There was no ounce of tank in them, and they still ended up with the number 1 overall pick. I hope Ben Johnson is realizing that. Also, one of their best players apparently wants to leave, Brian Burns, who I hope we go throw the bag at in free agency, him and or Josh Allen, because we need edge rusher real bad from reasons I've already explained. I've done full breakdowns as to why we need to attack edge rusher aggressively in free agency. Draft is cool, but free agency, we got to address edge rusher immediately. But one of their best players, Brian Burns, seems very unhappy with the situation. They had like a locker room interview after the final game of the season. He basically said he felt like he was not a priority to the organization. He feels unwanted. He's probably on the way out. So Ben Johnson, instead of going to the team that Brian Burns basically wants to leave and avoid at this point, go to one of the teams where he may land that has a big need for edge rusher. And I wouldn't be surprised if Adam Peters already has his eye on that guy. I'm still surprised we didn't get Brian Burns in the draft that he was taken. I literally mocked him to us. I really wanted him, and then I've seen what his career has been like for the Panthers. It's been really good, and now let's make everything come full circle and you can come play for us now. A few years late, but hey, man, better late than never type of situation. And then also let's compare quarterbacks, man. I know hindsight is 2020, but Bryce Young versus one of these top 3 quarterbacks we could potentially get. Come on, man. Like, it's got to be no comparison. And then, I'm not completely giving up on Bryce Young, even though I love it as a Georgia Bulldog fan, seeing Mac Jones be terrible, seeing Jalen Hurts failing, looking at Tua Tagovailoa be a game manager like my dog Cam Newton said he was, but people wanted to come at his neck and question his credibility. Now look at Tua, now look at Dak, look at Brock Purdy. Immediately after Cam Newton said that, Brock Purdy had his worst game of his life, throwing 4 interceptions against the Ravens. Cam Newton was always right. It's just a lot of people hating out there. But either way, back to my point, these Alabama quarterbacks have been bad, or at the very least disappointing. Add Jalen Hurts to that list as well. I love it. As a Georgia Bulldog fan, I'm so happy. That's a recruiting pitch Kirby Smart can use to these high school kids. But either way, moving on. Bryce Young versus one of these top quarterbacks in the draft between Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels, whichever one we want. More than likely, at the very least, we'll have our chance to get 2 of those guys. And a lot of people feel like Drake May and or Caleb Williams could have been quarterback 1 in last year's draft, even above like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud if they were eligible to go. So I don't see why Ben Johnson would look at Bryce Young. And I mean, I don't necessarily believe that much in quarterbacks being ruined like that, but there's definitely got to be a certain stain and a hit to Bryce Young's confidence, especially looking around him. Like, I mean, even going into the 2024 season right now, how are we going to fix the O-line? Who are we even going to potentially get as head coach? Because my point is, Ben Johnson is more than likely would choose us over the Panthers, especially if the pay is anywhere near equal, even in the similar range, even if the amount of power and responsibility is anywhere near in the same range. I'm pretty sure he would choose us in a heartbeat over the Panthers if it's only just those two options right there. We've already seen how GM was. I told y'all weeks ago, a couple of months ago, when David Tepper and Josh Harris and a few other owners were at this GM summit where they got to shake hands and talk personally and meet all of the potential top GM candidates out there. It was reported that David Tepper and Josh Harris were the most active there. Well, look at what's happened now. Fast forward a couple of months, and I've been telling y'all since those couple of months that we are the #1 landing spot for a GM and a head coach. And that if it's you and David Tepper being compared side by side as the best of anything, and it's just y'all two isolated, Josh Harris has to look way better just off of that alone. And then look how quickly we handled our GM situation. How we had Adam Peters and Ian Cunningham fighting to see who would get the job, and the Panthers right now have no idea who their guy will be. We'll dive into that soon. But either way, man, Ben Johnson has to look at this situation and be like Bryce Young or one of these potential top quarterbacks. And then back to my point, Josh Harris versus David Tepper. Look at David Tepper. He's catching an attitude, mad that his team is losing, which I don't understand. I don't know how he even went to that game and expected not to lose. Y'all sucked all year. I don't know why the last game of the season you're upset as if you just lost the game that was like the one game away from making the playoffs or something like that. Throwing a drink on fans. And the fine that he got, I mean, it sounds like a lot of money to people like us, but as far as percentages go to how much money he actually has, that was like a little slap on the wrist type of thing. But either way, I mean, he's just out of control. He's basically the new Dan Snyder. All of the reports of him meddling with the head coach and the GM, telling them what plays to call and how to develop Bryce Young, and like blaming it on his footwork and saying you need to do this and that, like literally telling them how to do their job. That level of meddling is insane. Dan Snyder is a worse person off the field than David Tepper, but on the field, you could argue David Tepper is even worse than what Dan Snyder was. Now, I don't know how much he's controlling the draft, because Dan Snyder, one of his worst parts on the field was controlling how we drafted people and telling the GMs and head coaches, draft this guy, even though I haven't done much research on him. I don't care how much research you've done on other players and how much you don't want to draft that guy. You better draft him. That's who Dan Snyder was. David Tepper is literally, between him and Jim Irsay, I would lean towards David Tepper is now the worst owner in the NFL now that Dan Snyder's gone. And then you have Josh Harris, who's looking like already one of the best owners. It's night and day right now. Josh Harris is not cheap, so if it comes to money, I'm very confident in Josh Harris either matching what David Tepper offers, Ben Johnson, or even going higher, because Josh Harris is not cheap. I've already explained to y'all since months ago that if you look at Josh Harris's staffs and coaches and front office and everything in his other leagues, the NBA team he owns, the NHL team he owns, all of those coaching staffs and front offices are some of the highest paid in their respective leagues. This guy's not cheap. He has hired Eugene Shin to a title with money that doesn't even exist on most NFL teams. He's like, hey, you can help me win games. You can help me build the Commanders the right way. I don't care. I'll spend the extra money. Just help me out. Same thing with Tim McGrath. We brought him in as literally just an injury consultant. Not even like the head athletic trainer, just an injury consultant. I don't think any other NFL team has a guy like that. And we're just paying that guy money to do that, to help us learn how to prevent injuries. And then when injuries happen, how to exactly manage it the best and go about it with certain technologies and it's analytics, stats, all kinds of stuff. He has like a business that he runs in different countries, especially for rugby and other sports and things like that. Josh Harris, again, my point is not cheap. He is giving people jobs and money to do things that most NFL teams don't. So it's not even like he's doing the bare minimum. He's looking everywhere. Can you help me? I'll pay you. Can you help me? I'll pay you. All of that type of stuff, and I love it. So I highly doubt he would just go and start being cheap with head coaches. Remember, there's no cap space in how you pay your front office and your coaching staff. So I would not be surprised if Josh Harris is willing to pay the same amount of money as David Tepper is. And at that point, when you're comparing everything else, I mean, come on, dog. It has to be obvious, because now we have Adam Peters on board as well versus whoever they may end up landing at GM, and they probably won't even get their top choice. Like, good luck with how bad David Tepper looks right now, all of those reports coming out, and how basically nobody wants to work with him. I mean, who knows? Maybe he has a change of heart. Maybe he can sell Ben Johnson on a new dream that, yeah, all of that dumb stuff I was doing, I won't do it anymore. But I wouldn't be sure to believe that at all. So good luck with finding a good GM as your next GM, because the other GM left because he was sick and tired of how you were treating him. So it was the head coach. Everybody was done. I think David Tepper technically fired those guys, but I'm pretty sure they were more than happy to be fired with the situations they had going with David Tepper with his severe meddling. Josh Harris is the perfect balance of he cares, he's involved, but not too much to where it's considered meddling. I mean, I just don't know how you can look at Josh Harris and David Tepper next to each other and be like, yeah, I want to go be a head coach for the team that already turned down last year, and they don't even look much better going into this year. I'm surprised Ben Johnson's even taking the interview, but also the owner that's out here dumping his drink on opponent's team's fans for talking trash to him when his team already sucked before going into the game, man. It's already inexcusable, but I'm still trying to figure out what David Tepper thought was going to happen in that game. Did he really think his Panthers were going to win that last game of the season? I'm still confused by that. So yeah, man, good luck finding a new GM. First of all, you're not going to find a GM as good as Adam Peters, because I mean, first of all, Adam Peters himself is arguably the top GM candidate, and he's already off the market. He was arguably the best candidate out there doing it. I would say he was. I think Ian Cunningham and Alec Hallaby were like a very close second and third, but I would pick Adam Peters as the best candidate. We already got him. He's off the market. Then there's Ian Cunningham from the Bears, who really wanted the Commander's job as well, and so far doesn't even have a meeting set up with the Panthers, I believe. So he was going all in on that, and even though he didn't get that job, we'll monitor this situation. I wouldn't be surprised if he just says, I'll just stick with the Bears and wait for a better opportunity later, or maybe take the Chargers job or one of those other jobs, but I highly doubt he's looking at the Panthers. And then you even have Alec Hallaby right now. He would have probably taken our GM opening if we would have wanted him. He didn't even make it to the second interviews. It was just between Adam Peters and Ian Cunningham. So we'll see what the Panthers end up getting at GM. That's probably going to play a big role into whether Ben Johnson even wants to join the team or not. And if they don't have a GM hired by the time they start doing real interviews with them, and we already are ready to offer him a deal or something like that, he may just not even risk it and just go ahead and take the deal that we offer him. I wouldn't be surprised at all. And just also pay attention to how quickly Adam Peters and Ian Cunningham moved with us. I mean, they interviewed Tuesday for the first time, and then the only reason they weren't able to come back Wednesday for the second interview because we had to interview guys like Alec Hallaby and a few others. They came back as soon as possible on Thursday. First interview Tuesday, second interview Thursday, to see who could win between Adam Peters and Ian Cunningham, and then Adam Peters accepted the job by Friday, within 3 days of the first interview. That's how quickly these guys were moving, rushing, and literally competing against each other to get this job. Again, I don't even hear Ian Cunningham having a confirmed interview with the Panthers yet. With as fast as he was moving for us, it sounds like he just may not be interested in the Panthers at all. So my point is, the Panthers don't even necessarily have top GMs potentially interested in them. We'll see though, because they do have some interviews lined up. They have Brandon Tills today for their GM vacancy. He interviewed yesterday. Well, by the time y'all are watching this, it'll actually be January 15th. So 2 days ago, he interviewed January 15th, potentially for that job. Brandon Tills from the Chiefs. And then you have Mike Disner from the Lions, their COO. They've requested permission to speak to him. He hasn't accepted it yet. And then, and that's pretty interesting too, because maybe, you know how Josh Harris is playing chess. We hired Rick Spielman. His brother is a top executive for the Lions. That's our connection to Ben Johnson, just like how he brought in Bob Myers. Him and Adam Peters went to UCLA together, and I'm pretty sure that helped a little bit in us getting him. Even though I'm pretty sure even if we didn't have Bob Myers, Adam Peters would have still wanted this job and would have taken this job. But that only helps. And it sounds like the Panthers are trying to do the same thing, because they're trying to see if they can bring in the COO of the Lions and see if that can help bring over Ben Johnson. Highly doubt it's enough though. And then actually, while I'm talking, my fault, Eagles assistant GM Alec Hallaby interviewed for the Panthers job January 12th, actually. So it been happened. We'll see what happens with that, if he's even willing to accept it, because Ian Cunningham, Adam Peters, and I don't remember if Alec Hallaby did it, but other top GMs have interviewed for jobs and still turned them down. They just want to hear them out. They catch the spill, they see whatever dream that team is selling them, and then they're like, yeah, I interviewed for them, but I'm good. I'm just going to stay where I'm at. We'll see if Alec Hallaby does that. And again, depending on how quickly the Panthers move, if whenever Ben Johnson's available for an in-person hire, if they don't have a GM ready, it may be a hard sell to him, and he may just go ahead and go with us before even really getting an honest chance to interview with them for real. We'll see how that goes though. Now moving on, of course, he's still leading the odds, as the betting odds, as being our next head coach, as in Ben Johnson, with a negative 140. By far the highest odds to be our next head coach. But shouts out to Bobby Slowick, who's slowly creeping up into my number one candidate, like Bobby Slowick 1A, Ben Johnson 1B, and then Mike McDonald. I like him so much, I may make him 1C instead of 3. Like, it's that close. But Bobby Slowick is second in odds with a plus 300. Again, Ben Johnson is negative 140. Jim Harbaugh plus 600. Again, I've already explained Bill Belichick. Go ahead and scratch him off the list. I would put my life savings on the fact that we're not hiring him. That's plus 650. And then Mike McDonald is plus 900. So there go the updated coaching odds. But again, Ben Johnson is still number one most likely, and by a wide margin. Negative 140 to the guy in second place, Bobby Slowick, plus 300. Serious, man. Also, shouts out Rep the District. I shouted this out in my previous video. Make sure you follow them on Twitter, YouTube, everywhere, because they always have great stats and stuff. But they also bring up a funny point. Other than Brian Daboll right now, Ben Johnson could end up being the longest tenured head coach in the NFC East, with how Nick Sirianni's being looked at right now, and especially Mike McCarthy. He may end up gone as well. We'll see. I think Mike McCarthy is the most likely to be fired. Highly doubt Nick Sirianni is going to be fired, but hey, man, you never know. They both had just had terribly disappointing seasons right now, and so Brian Daboll is safe. So it'll probably be Brian Daboll and then Ben Johnson, the second longest tenured coach in the NFC East, which is crazy right now. Also, shouts out to Ben Johnson, because against the Rams, shouts out to Ryan Fowler for this tweet breaking this down. 5 pass and 5 run opening drive scripts. Touchdown ended up resulting in one of them. Heavy personnel with 6 offensive linemen quite often. Pre-snap motion to create isolation. Smart. Hell of a weak side run game. 3 out of 3 in the red zone and 6.1 yards per play. At a certain point in that game, that's not how they finished, but at a certain point in that game, that's how much he was cooking. Which takes me to the point that we also have a scheduled interview with Raheem Morris, the Rams defensive coordinator, and we don't have an exact date for that yet, but he has interviews with the Panthers and the Seahawks as well this week, so he's a busy man. Ben Johnson's interviewing with the Panthers and the Commanders, and Raheem Morris is interviewing with the Panthers, Commanders, and Seahawks. So the Panthers and Commanders are competing with Raheem Morris and Ben Johnson, but I strongly feel like we're more than likely leaning towards Ben Johnson. Betting odds, everything I've heard from multiple reports, all of that type of stuff. Now, I would say in that matchup, when the Lions played the Rams, Ben Johnson's offense versus Raheem Morris's defense, direct matchup. So this is a great way to like kind of separate them to see who's the better coach. I would say Ben Johnson won the first half, but I would definitely say Raheem Morris won the second half. The Lions scored 21 points in the first half and then only scored 3 points the entire second half. They won, but you could give Anthony Glenn a lot of credit for that. I'm not gonna lie. We'll talk about that towards the end of the video. In Ben Johnson's case, especially in the first half, it seemed like every time Jared Goff threw the ball, the receiver was wide open. So I was giving Ben Johnson a lot of credit for how that offense looked, especially in the first half. Jared Goff was pretty accurate, and the receivers and everybody was getting open, but I felt like Ben Johnson was doing an excellent job of scheming people open and giving Jared Goff easy reads to make plays and things like that, keeping the Rams defense off balance and all of that type of stuff. And Jared Goff finished with very efficient stats. 22 of 27 passing by the end of the game, 277 yards, 1 touchdown and no interceptions. And Amon-Ra St. Brown had 110 receiving yards, and Reynolds had 80 receiving yards. Those are really good stats right there, pretty productive. But at the same time, Raheem Morris shut down the Lions in the second half, especially overall the run game, because David Montgomery only had 57 rushing yards on the day, and Jahmyr Gibbs only had 25, even though he also had 20-something receiving yards. But that's 82 rushing yards between those two guys, and that's it. But with that deadly rushing attack they had this entire regular season. And Raheem Morris forced the Lions to only convert 3 of their 9 third downs, which is 33%, well below their average this season of 41.2%, which was 10th in the NFL in a regular season. Speaking of below the Lions season averages, let's keep going. Raheem Morris held the Lions to 21 points when the Lions scored 26.9 points per game in the regular season, which was 5th in the NFL. Also, he held the Lions to 334 total yards, while the Lions averaged 391.4 yards per game, which was third in the NFL. And even crazier, he held the Lions to 79 total rushing yards, while the Lions averaged 132.8 per game in the regular season, almost double that, which was sixth in the NFL. I'm telling you, man, Raheem Morris did his thing, especially in that second half. The adjustments he made, incredible, man. Chef kiss level stuff. He's still not my favorite candidate over Ben Johnson, but boy, he probably increased his odds of becoming a head coach somewhere around the NFL after that performance, again, especially the second half. So overall, you can argue that Raheem Morris probably won that matchup overall. Ben Johnson won the game, but a lot of that credit actually goes to the Lions defensive coordinator, Anthony Glenn, who we are also interested in as a head coach candidate so far. We've already requested to interview him as well. We don't have a finalized date when that virtual interview will happen, but we've requested to interview him. So both Ben Johnson and Anthony Glenn from the same team, the Lions, one offensive coordinator, one defensive coordinator. Now, again, I still prefer Ben Johnson between the two, but it does seem like every top defensive-minded head coaching candidate has won battles against the top offensive-minded candidates, because Mike Macdonald shut down Bobby Slowick and Ben Johnson. So again, I still prefer offensive-minded coach for multiple reasons. Most importantly, with the number 2 overall pick, I want an elite quarterback developer. But also, like I keep saying, when you go defensive-minded head coach, it's really harder to hit on offensive coordinator since so many teams are out there trying to give the good ones head coaching jobs. So it's hard to convince one to come here to just be an offensive coordinator when other teams are offering them a head coaching spot. And then when you do find a good one, which is already difficult enough, he's going to get stolen by another team offering him a promotion with more power and more money to be their head coach. So now you got to go find another one. And then it's probably going to happen again. You're going to have to find another one. I mean, Bobby Slowick was the offensive coordinator for the Texans for one season, and we're already talking about him being one of our top head coaching candidates, and several teams want him. He's more than likely going to leave after just being there for one season. So poor D'Amico Ryans, he found a gem in an offensive coordinator from the 49ers, brought him over. He ran the show on offense, his first time ever being an offensive coordinator in his NFL life, his career, and balled out. And then he's immediately going to become a head coach within just 1 year of ever being an offensive coordinator. And so now he's on the look for another offensive coordinator. So just imagine how difficult it is when you hire a defensive-minded head coach, how hard it is to get a consistent offensive coordinator. If it's up to me, if we go defensive-minded head coach, Shane Waldron over there for the Seahawks is my favorite offensive coordinator candidate. But man, if he balls out like I think he will, we're going to have to find a replacement for him within the next year or two. So that's one of the main reasons why I prefer a defensive-minded head coach. But hey, man, defensive-minded head coaches are winning right now. Mike Macdonald spanked Bobby Slowick and Ben Johnson when he played them this season. And again, Raheem Morris, I would say, won that matchup against Ben Johnson in the playoffs just now. And even though Ben Johnson technically won the game, you can give more credit to Anthony Glenn, the defensive coordinator, over Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator in that game. And I'm not going to lie, before we get up out of here, Detroit, you're dead wrong for booing my dog, Matthew Stafford, dog. All that losing he had to put up with, all of those games he played through severe injuries and severe pain, y'all owe him, if anything. I was pretty upset when I saw them booing him. I was like, the nerd, man, that's why y'all don't deserve greatness. I started to root against them after I saw that. So y'all better stop booing Matthew Stafford. First of all, that's a Georgia Bulldog. Learn your manners when you booing greatness. You know what I'm saying? That's a Super Bowl winner right there. You feel me? But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. And before we move on, I'm not surprised Mike Macdonald shut down all of these elite offensive-minded offensive coordinators, all of these guys, because he is a Georgia Bulldog as well. Let me just go ahead and throw that in there once again, just in case y'all forgot, man. But yeah, man, that's the end of all of this. Appreciate y'all. Stay tuned. So much more content on the way. Mock draft is in the oven, but things just keep delaying it. More important news, breaking news keeps coming out and all of that type of stuff. So I'm going to keep y'all updated on everything Commanders. One-stop shop for everything Commanders. No matter how small, no matter how untrustworthy the source of the news, we're going to talk about every little thing, except for the whole Caleb Williams talking about I won't go to the draft unless the Bears promise me to trade that number 1 overall pick and stuff like that. Like, we're not even gonna acknowledge something that crazy that's clearly from a parody account. But anything else that's even slightly more trustworthy, we're talking about it on this channel. I'm gonna catch y'all later, man. I appreciate y'all. I'm out.